Somali pirates demand a $25 million ransom to release a Saudi oil tanker. As Red Sea Arab countries meet in Cairo to find a way to solve the piracy problem in the Horn of Africa, what can they do when some of the mightiest naval forces in the world have failed? How is it that gangs of men in small boats can hold a whole industry to ransom? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Sohail Rahman. In the Gulf of Aden, pirates rule the waves. This week alone, 4 ships have been seized and are being held for ransom. The largest of these is the Saudi oil supertanker, the Syria Star. It's carrying $100 million worth of oil. Now, its owners are said to be in negotiations for the ship's return with its Somali seajackers. At least 13 vessels with more than 270 crew members are being held by various pirate gangs. Leaders from the Arab Red Sea nations are meeting in Egypt to discuss the escalating problem. The added costs of piracy will be high on the agenda. It's now 10 times more expensive to insure ships for a trip through this perilous stretch of water. The US Navy says the military coalition cannot effectively patrol the 2.5 million square miles of water. This may lead to private security firms taking over, which would cost shipping companies and countries they come from even more. The Cairo conference is aimed at coming up with solutions to combat the threat of piracy, and will also discuss the possibility of taking different trade routes. Well, joining me on the programme today in London, Mark Calter, a maritime intelligence professional at Olton Solutions. Also in London, Richard Spector, a partner at European Legal Solutions, specialising in international and shipping law. And in Copenhagen, Fritz Hansen, Executive Vice President of the Danish Shipowners Association. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on Inside Story. Mark Calter, can I begin with you? Is this meeting of Red Sea nations discussing the piracy problems well overdue?
Yes, it is actually, Sohail. It's well overdue. Taking the point, what you said earlier on, 2.5 million square miles of ocean is a lot of ocean for the current navies to patrol. We now need to seek help and endorse help from the Red Sea navies.
Fritz Hansen, are they actually reacting to this latest Saudi hijacking, or have these nations really come to the end of their tether? Because as a shipping nation yourselves, you represent a lot of ship owners that have their vessels go through the Red Sea and around the Arabian Peninsula and into the Gulf.
Yeah, that's true. We have had a Danish Navy vessel in charge of this piracy combating for some months, and we have been asking everywhere to get more support from other trade and shipping nations. And now lately we hope that we can also activate assistance from our friends in the Red Sea area.
Mark Calter, can I just come back to you? How difficult is it to try and get support from other countries when you're talking sort of on a civilian level? Because in terms of politically, you have the coalition task force in the Gulf and the Arabian Peninsula patrolling these seas, but when you're a commercial vessel, it's quite difficult, isn't it, to get governments and people like NATO, perhaps, for example, to listen?
Correct, it is, and with the Syria Star hijacking, this is what has brought us all around the table and talking. So, hence for the Cairo meeting. Really, though, you've got to look at it as it's not just a shipping problem; it's a global problem, really. So, we've got to seek help elsewhere. The Admiral of the Fifth Fleet Navy has said that they can't be everywhere. It's a large ocean. We need help. So, I'm actually endorsing that. We need to have genuine, demonstrable maritime security professionals, not professionals from the land-based world of not too far from your region, but genuine maritime professionals to help the navies whilst it takes the onus away from the navies, shall I say.
Well, of course, those navies need sort of legal guidance. I suppose I'm going to bring in Richard Spector here. I mean, what sort of legal guidance can come out of this sort of meeting in Egypt at the moment, or is it just talk and a photo opportunity?
Well, I think the issue we have at the moment is there's no clear international consensus on, number one, what exactly constitutes piracy, and number two, I think even more importantly, what are the rules of engagement. And the problem we have is the UN Law of the Sea Convention attempted to define piracy. and in doing that it said that piracy did not involve piracy was only something that happened at high seas or outside territorial waters, which didn't include the waters of a country like Somalia. So further to that, there was a UN resolution saying that countries that were permitted by the transitional government in Somalia their navies would be allowed into those seas to for the purpose of repressing piracy, and under international with respect to piracy under international law. The problem it lies there. There are no clear internationally agreed rules on exactly what
is allowed to happen.
What can happen?
Well, of course, I mean, we saw not too recently, and I'm going to bring in Jan and Fritz Hansen in a moment, we saw the Danish contingent to the CTF arrest pirates. They went to court, but the Danish authorities then turned around and said, well, actually, we don't have jurisdiction. So, in fact, no matter how much action seems to be taken by coalition forces, for example, international naval vessels in those waters, Richard, it seems that their hands are tied. They can't do anything.
Well, this is a huge problem, and without an international consensus, each ship as it is may be acting on the rules of engagement of the flag of that particular vessel. And we have, for example, in the US, they can act preemptively when they spot an act of piracy. Well, what is an act of piracy? That number one. Number two, that may be too late. And thirdly, once they have taken these pirates on board, what do they actually do with them? Because we now move on to the UK, for example. The UK are very worried that when they take these pirates on board, that they don't want to hand them over to neighbouring countries for fear of human rights abuses. But then on the other hand, they don't want to take them back to Britain because they're worried that they're going to seek political asylum. So we really need international agreement on what can be done.
Let's get a sense of what it was like in Denmark. Jan Fritz Hansen, I mean, how frustrating was that court verdict, that court jurisdiction, that the Danes could not do anything with these pirates and they had to be let go?
Of course, that was very frustrating for the crew and for the Navy officers that have caught these criminals. But if we look at it in a broader perspective, we think it's much more important to secure the merchant vessels in the area. And I think we can do that awaiting any legal institutions. And how do we do with prisoners? We don't think that is the main issue just now. We think the main issue is to escort our vessels through the area. And that's why we need some more Navy ships down there, and we also need some of the vessels already there with a clearer mandate for rules of engagement. And we see some of our friends down in the Navy forces that are not really geared, and their mandate is not so much to combat pirates. And we know that this is changing now. We know there are discussions in the German government just today to see whether they could change the rules of engagement of their vessels down there. And I think we have to take both avenues, both have more vessels down there and give them some clearer rules of engagement. And to that effect, we are having a meeting next week with the United Nations and the Secretary General there and discuss could we get some kind of mandate or advice from the United Nations, and then we could try to fulfill that in our national rules of engagement.
Well, it does seem that possibly going down the United Nations route is the way forward. But Mark Calter, can I just bring you in here that the NATO Secretary General Jaap de Hoop Schaffer has said he's concerned about the situation, but he's certainly not going to push NATO troops to the forefront and try and tackle this problem. So where does it actually end up? Do you end up with private security firms actually taking control of oil ships and protecting them as they travel from oil destinations in the Gulf to the rest of the world?
Well, I think you're right, Sohail. I think we have to look at that. I'm not a rules of engagement expert, and obviously there are really, really complex issues there, and the different complex issues of flags on various ships. However, if you look at it properly and how the Royal Navy deals with things to a certain extent, the Royal Navy doesn't employ the British Army to do onboarding operations. And I think what the shipping companies are frightened of are land-based mercenaries coming into a sea-based world. So, therefore, the Royal Navy employs Royal Marines to do boarding operations. So let's go to the Merchant Navy, which is what we're going to be protecting out there. Let's look at the Merchant Navy going to professional maritime sea-based professionals to come in and help the crews, train the crews. I'm not saying arm the crews at all, because that is a big risk in itself. But therefore we must be able to, let's look at it and take intelligence to the ship as well. Smart intelligence. There are ways and means now that we can get advance warning of pirate activity out there. Advance warning allows us to prepare, and also it gives us time to basically move away from any threat, any action, and it needs to be coordinated by professional maritime entities on board a ship.
Mr. Hansen, is that what your members are thinking now in Denmark? Either we put our own protection in place on our oil vessels, for example, or we find a different route for shipping, which is certainly going to affect those Red Sea nations, such as Egypt, for example, who depend on the revenue that they generate through the Suez Canal.
Yeah, exactly. We are going on the latter path. We are not prepared to arm ourselves. We are civil seafarers and merchant vessels, and we are not geared to that activity. And taking aboard guards and going that way and equip our ships with guns, that's not really the way forward. We want a protection by some international navy forces that are professionals down there that can operate these things and not harming any civil interest. So we have to consider, if we can't get enough support or patrolling or escort in that area north of Somalia, we will have to go south of Africa. And just now, while we are talking, the biggest Danish company, shipping company, have decided to take their vessels south of Africa if they are slow steamers or that they are one of the ships that could be targeted. So a lot of Danish-operated vessels will, from now on, go south of Africa, because we can't just now guarantee the safety.
Well, of course, we'll come back to that issue. We're going to take a short break now, but when we come back, we'll be taking a closer look at who these pirates are and what international communities are doing to tackle them. Stay with us here on Inside Story.